Welcome to our lesson on Mary Jackson. This is a picture of Mary Jackson working as an engineer at NASA. Let's learn some vocabulary that will help us with our reading today. Let's start with equality. Equality is when everyone is treated the same. So it doesn't matter if people are different, they get to be treated the same. In our text today, we read, each of these three women played a unique role in promoting the equality of African American women in the workplace. So this means that the women we are reading about made sure that everyone was treated the same. You can also see the word equality in 14 languages at the bottom of our screen. Now let's talk about discrimination. Discrimination is the opposite of equality. In discrimination, people are treated unfairly because they are different. In our text, we read, and Mary Jackson fought discrimination to earn advanced engineering degrees that few women and African Americans before her had received. So discrimination was a problem that Mary Jackson faced. Because she was different than most engineers, she had to work very hard and overcome discrimination to become an engineer. You can see the word discrimination at the bottom of your screen in 13 languages. The reason that Mary Jackson had to deal with discrimination is because she was a minority. A minority is a group of people who are different from the people in power. So, when some people are in power or in control, they sometimes are not nice to people who are different. That's discrimination. So usually discrimination is against people who are a minority. It's sort of like when a group of friends doesn't let a new person sit with them at the lunch table. The new person doesn't have friends to speak up for them, so they're on their own. They're a minority in a certain sense. So when we talk about minorities, that's usually why we talk about it, because they're not treated the same. In our text, we read, in this role, she worked hard to make sure the government hired and promoted women and minorities. So minorities are often people of color. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the word minority in 12 languages. Let's talk about segregation. In the 1950s and 1960s, Black people who were a minority, remember that means they did not have power, had to face segregation, especially in the South, in places like Tennessee. Segregation is the enforced separation of people based on the color of their skin. Look at these water fountains. What are some things you see that are different about the two water fountains? I notice that the water fountain on the left says white, and the water fountain on the right says colored. Have you ever seen water fountains with labels like that? Probably not, because that's been illegal in America for a long time. But in the 50s and 60s, this was a normal thing to see. White people drank out of the water fountain on the left, but if you were not white, you had to drink out of the water fountain on the right. You know what else I notice? The water fountain on the left is nicer than the water fountain on the right. That's sad. Let's read what this looks like in our text. At the time, these classes were only held in a segregated high school in the evenings. So schools were segregated just like these water fountains. That meant that people who were white and people who were not white couldn't go to school together. So, Mary Jackson had to ask special permission just to go to a school that had only white people at it. That's kind of crazy, huh? Looking back at our water fountains, do you think schools for white people were more or less nice than schools for people who were not white? I want you to give me an answer to that question below this video before you start reading. Because of discrimination, Mary Jackson could not become a manager. A manager is a person who is a leader at a job. They tell other people what to do. Let's read an example from our text. Instead of continuing her career as a scientist, Jackson switched careers yet again, this time to serve NASA as the Federal Women's Program Manager. So that means that Mary Jackson was the leader of that program. You can see the word manager in 14 languages at the bottom of the screen. Before we do our exit ticket today, we're going to make a circle map so we can describe Mary Jackson. So if you have a piece of paper, I want you to make a small circle and then a big circle, just like I've done here. In the small circle, you can write Mary Jackson, because we're going to write about Mary Jackson. We're going to define her. Then, in the big outer circle, we're going to write some more words. Let me show you how I did it for the first paragraph. I'm going to read the paragraph and show you what words I wrote in my circle map. Let me read. Mary Jackson was one of the computers who worked directly under Supervisor Dorothy Vaughan. Let's pause for a second. So when we heard that sentence, we learned two things. Number one, we learned that Mary Jackson was a computer. So I wrote computer on my map. We also learned that she worked for Dorothy Vaughan because a supervisor is the same as a manager. So I wrote that she worked for Dorothy Vaughan. Dorothy Vaughan was her boss. Let's keep reading. She joined NACA in 1951 after several career changes and earning a degree in math and physical sciences. So I also wrote on my map that she worked at NACA. That's what we just learned, right? So as you read today, add to your map. That way, you'll be ready